We are in the era where we can just populate in plain language a huge document describing how something complex should work, and agent will come up with a roughly working solution on its own. So this is where we are in terms of what agents can do. But again, it's not a bug, it's a feature, because our requirements are always loose and we are underspecifying stuff. And since we underspecify it, the LLM has a choice to decide on its own, if the content is underspecified, how to proceed with it.
What should I expect an agent to be really good at most of the time, and actually not be surprised if it struggles with other tasks?
There are lots of caveats to that. Is that like usually it won't be exactly what you want, and you will need to anyway like manual interventions and fixes to validate that, like fix it and correct where it made some wrong decisions. So human in the loop still essential. If you didn't say in your specification which database to use, like Postgres or Mongo, it's up to the LLM to come up with what it thinks. But it's not a problem of an LLM. It's just because you underspecified, right? So I would say, like to sum up, if you give like a very clean instruction, a very detailed information about how you see your solution should work and what things it should include, then it's already good enough at instruction following to develop you a prototype which matches your expectations, both in backend and front end, I would say. There might be some, again, like limitations of the solution which it will come up with, but that can be because you were underspecified in the spec, or because the task was, I don't know, sometimes it can come up with non-efficient, like inefficient solution, which won't be scalable, and you will anyway need to refactor. But usually it comes also because of your loose specification. So yeah, like for sure, like in one shot, in few shots, you can come up with a working game which works in your browser. You can come up with a server which can be hosted locally, and sometimes I think you can even go beyond that and do even a deployment also fully autonomously. That's what at least Lovable offers, right? They like fully maintain the life cycle of the development of a front end and back end, and serving this for you, and you don't need to make any decisions about this. So agents are that powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But let's now talk about mentioning deployment.
We're going to jump into the second half of our conversation, but first, a quick shout out to AI Native DevCon. 2 days of hands-on sessions, deep dives, and honest conversations about what it means to build AI native software. November 18th and 19th in New York, or join virtually from anywhere. Tickets and details at ainativedev.io/devcon. See you there.
When we think about something that we are happy to push to production, something that we as professional developers now want to use and build with. In fact, why don't we think first about the actual development environment that we as professional developers need to use? There's certain things like, security issues, for example. If I want to use Claude Code locally, it's going to have full access to my system. If I want to run things locally, okay, what's happening now? Where do I need to kind of first of all think from a professional point of view of locking down my system a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So like basically, if you're working on your like local version of the repo and you're given a full access to the Claude Code to work on it, at some point it can do rm minus rf accidentally, and if you don't do a checkpoints, then you're in trouble. And there are lots of stories on the Reddit where Claude Code like went that crazy and did this. And in order to accelerate the professional development experience, there are like different approaches how to do that. One which you can do on your own. You can spawn Claude codes always in the isolated environments. So you can create a separate Docker container, which will have a replica of your repo, and you will send the commands to this Docker container, and agent will, in this isolated environment, will be working on a replica. And actually, that's one branch of solving these issues with the permissions and with the scare of being scared to remove something. So isolated environments, that's where you can solve some of the issues. Another type of problem with security, for example, related to the API keys. For example, what if you are asking your agent to write another agent, right? Like, for example, you're a company which develops like agents for some reason, and to test this agent, it might need to have access to the API token, right? And if you provide this API token, then it can go crazy there because it can start doing infinite tests, basically burning your budget. This is for these types of the issues, that's much more hard, like much harder to come up with some security solution, unless you cut off the internet completely. But yeah, like that's a type of the security concern. But yeah, like speaking of the main approach, the sandboxing environments, that's what allows you to solve most of the problems. Another way of solving these types of problems is like, again, like limiting the available tools for the agents. For example, agent cannot write or edit files under specific directories. So you are, as the user in the loop, can create these rules, and this will prohibit agent from making like dangerous actions from a very sensible like libraries or directories where there's a lot of sensitive information. And yeah, like some tools, for example, Gemini CLI comes with a sandbox solution available out of the box. So if you start a Gemini session with a sandbox from your current directory, then it will make a clone of your repo in the isolated Docker container. And you can also specify which commands or which tools are available. So you can disconnect it from the internet, for example. And then, it will just like start working in the isolated environment, and you don't need to do any manual spawning of the containers. They are all will be given to you because Gemini CLI cared about this and cared about this experience. Yeah, that's one way to look at this.